How's that for a slice of fried gold?
You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I'll be back.
Just a flesh wound. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
I'm sorry, Ben. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
E.G. Marshall mentions a Mr. Pratt at one point in George Romero's Creepshow. He played a formidable millionaire named Mr. Pratt.
Are you reading IMDb trivia?
Welcome to the trivia for.
We're just gonna read the IMDb trivia for
Right.
an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was Julie Bibbs's first acting role, first feature film in which she starred.
I would not say that it's a starring role.
That was not. I was looking for her that whole fucking segment, and I was like, "Wait a minute,
30
this is
seconds,
like
30 seconds of screen time."
Yeah, it was. Anyway, we'll get to her in a minute, as we always do. Rita.
Hey, you go Rita, not Darla from Buffy.
I don't. Because I never really watched all of Buffy because you canceled your stupid podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm too busy for more than one podcast.
Yeah, I watched the first like 2 seasons of Buffy, and then I stopped when you stopped. Whatever. Well, hello everybody. This is Gary Horde, and this is the Cinema Shock.
You are about to do your other podcast intro. You are about to do your other podcast intro.
You're right.
Hey.
Welcome to Cinema Shock, the podcast celebrating the legacy of cult and genre entertainment.
He's Gary Horn.
I'm Gary Horde.
I'm Justin Bishop. Joining us today, writer, comedian, and Harvey Keitel impersonator, Mr. Todd Davis.
I think
listen to
right.
how
intro
good
is a better intro than anybody else on this show gets, and I'm starting to be offended by it. The Todd Davis gets all of these credentials listed ahead of it.
Listen, have you seen his? Have you seen
a
his
co-host
resume?
of Cinema Shock?
But have you heard his Harvey Keitel impersonation?
I have not yet. I don't think.
You're going to be okay. Tell me you're going to be okay.
That's exactly the one I would have done, honestly.
Thank you. Available for parties, bar mitzvahs.
Oh, man.
Yes.
I got to tell you, I don't know. Watching him in this movie and watching him in this movie and on the old show we did Passion of the Christ, and I just don't know. I don't get, like, I mean,
he's not in Passion of the Christ, Gary. He's in The Last Temptation of Christ.
That's the same movie.
No, vastly different movies.
Jesus Christ Superstar, Passion of the Christ.
I would watch
Get
Jesus
the same
Christ
story
Superstar
either way.
starring Harvey Keitel. I would watch that.
Passion of the Christ with musical numbers.
Jim Caviezel's laying bloody and broken. Harvey Keitel's like, "You're okay. Tell me you're going to be
You're
okay."
going to be okay.
Oh man, that's why I can't drink before the show. But anyway, I'm just saying he's a weird actor, dude.
I love him.
Yeah.
He
gives it his all. He gives it his all.
He gives it something.
You ever seen Bad Lieutenant?
Yeah, I mean, and I was gonna say I knew him from roles like Bad Lieutenant or in like Pulp Fiction. Is like a world of Harvey Keitel I never knew before.
It's the Nicolas Cage version of Harvey Keitel is what you get in this movie.
Yeah,
like just dialing it up to 100. And anyway, I guess we should start. We're just talking about the movie like we're already 45 minutes into this episode.
People just want us to be authentic. And these are the things that are on our minds.
So while I was researching this episode, I found a quote by George Romero that I would just like to read to you.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's a short quote, but I like it. It's about his views on the film industry, about Hollywood. He says, "If I fail, they write me off as a statistic. If I succeed, they pay me $1 million to fly out to Hollywood and fart." It's a great.
Let's
great
get
quote.
that stitched on a pillow.
It's so true.
I mean, I'd fart for $1 million.
Let's
Great
get
quote.
that stitched on a pillow.
It's so true.
I mean, I'd fart for $1 million.
I fart for free. So
You do often.
it's true. I appreciate his candor.
Yeah, he's great. I love listening to him in interviews so much. He seems like such a nice guy. Seems like a guy you just want to hang out with and, smoke weed or something. I assume he smokes weed. He seems like the type.
Guys like him, and I know people think whatever they want about whoever, but like somebody, because of the other show I've been seeing a lot of recently is like a Billy Corgan or something. They both have this idea of like, and Billy's more protective of himself and so seems more defensive a lot of times, but he also has this like what they think is cool, and that's just the way it's going to be. And
Right.
I'm just going to keep doing what I want to do, and
Yeah.
it's just like
If
I'm
it
just not
takes
cool
off,
anymore.
Yeah, even if it becomes successful, then it does. If it doesn't, at least I was kind of true to myself as an artist. That's kind of Romero's thing, which and as his career went on, he was, it's probably not the best way to put it, but increasingly out of touch with what was popular. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Like he created a genre with Night of the Living Dead, basically, and he continued to not milk that necessarily, but to see its potential with later films. But I think as his career went on with stuff like Monkey Shines and The Dark Half and whatnot, like I feel like he did kind of lose touch. But I think that was also probably due to just the evolution of the movie industry. Like he was no longer able to like produce movies independently that would meet his vision. Not if he wanted the budget that would meet his vision. So he like, well, I'll do Monkey Shines, and able to like produce movies independently that would meet his vision. Not if he wanted the budget that would meet his vision. So he like, well, I'll do Monkey Shines and get a budget, and then I have to make this idiotic movie about a killer monkey.
Yeah, I mean, this movie, there were some concerns I had coming off of Monkey Shines, and this film doesn't alleviate some of those.
Right. Yeah. So after, when last we met on the Cinema Shock podcast, Mr. Romero had just come off the disappointing experience of Monkey Shines. It was, as we discussed, a critical and financial disappointment. A critical and financial success were kind of exactly what Romero needed at that point in his career. So that did not help him. So for his next move, he turned to a format that had done him well in the past, the anthology film. And he turned to an old friend who'd helped his career in the past, a man by the name of Dario Argento.
Still alive.
From the creators of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, to Evil Eyes.
We are felons, Jessica. We have committed grand larceny here and fraud and God knows what else.
Beyond the limits of morality.
In a few weeks we'll have it all.
And beyond the boundaries of life.
I am dead.
You killed her.
And I didn't kill her! Take one look at him, then tell me you think he's still alive.
The terror of George Romero.
Wake up!
The suspense of Dario Argento. A new dimension of evil that goes beyond all evil. To Evil Eyes.
So those anthology movies, we talked briefly about them in Creepshow, but we haven't really gotten into them. But their origins, of course, are long before Creepshow. Creepshow was kind of a part of a tradition of horror films that dated all the way back to the beginning of the genre, almost back to the 1940s. I think was the earliest example of the anthology film. But one of the most famous examples of the anthology film, at least early on, was the 1962 Roger Corman produced and directed Tales of Terror. We briefly discussed this, back in episode 1 of the series. I think we mentioned Tales of Terror. But that one featured adaptations of 4 Edgar Allan Poe stories. Corman adapted Morella, The Black Cat, The Cast of Amontillado, and The Facts of the Amontillado. Say it with an accent like Gary did. And the facts in the case of Mr.
You
Valentine.
got to do your hand like this.
It's not Italian. What is?
Yeah.
Is it Italian? We'll discuss further down the line on this podcast. But he decided to have a go at his own version of the anthology film, sort of an updated version of Corman's film, and he would similarly adapt the works of Edgar Allan Poe. So his goal, Argento, what he wanted to do was kind of a forebearer to something like Masters of Horror, the TV show.
Yeah.
What he wanted to do is he wanted to get a bunch of Masters of Horror, some of the major horror directors who were working at the time, guys like George Romero, John Carpenter, Wes Craven, reportedly even Stephen King was approached to direct a segment.
I saw that his original idea was a TV show, like that was the goal. Michel Soavi was inked for The Mask of the Red Death, which was originally what George Romero wanted to do, but this guy took it over. So George took the case of Mr. Valdemar, and like Richard Stanley took it over. So George took the case of Mr. Valdemar, and like Richard Stanley was doing Cask of Amontillado.
That would be great. Honestly,
he had cast like Michael Gambon as Fortunato and Jonathan Pryce as.
But this was in the TV version of this.
Yeah, this is like they had worked it out. Like it was supposedly going to be a TV thing.
Argento had done an anthology TV series in the early 1970s called Door into Darkness, an Italian TV series. It only lasted like 4 episodes. I think Argento directed 2 of the 4 episodes. I don't know that it was ever broadcast in the US, but it is actually on Shudder right now. I'm very curious to watch it because I've never seen it. But yeah, 4 like hour-long episodes, all different stories. So basically a precursor to, like the Tales from the Dark Side TV series that Romero would later do.
Yeah, this exact quote up. And whoever they were originally pitching it to was not impressed enough to continue with it or something.
Like a studio, you mean?
Yeah, like a studio. And so they just went with Argento, ended up doing the other part of it, and they released it as a movie. I don't know. It was weird. I couldn't separate this completely.
Yeah. So the information that I was able to dig up on this basically says that they couldn't get Wes Craven or John Carpenter just due to simple scheduling issues. Now, I couldn't find any direct quotes from either of them about that, but multiple sources that I found attributed it to scheduling issues. And Stephen King apparently, it wasn't really a scheduling thing with him. It was that he had recently done Maximum Overdrive and had a pretty shitty experience and didn't think he had the chops to be a movie director, which if you've seen Maximum Overdrive, you might agree.
Well, it's tough. I mean, semis are notoriously hard to direct.
Yeah, they're fussy.
He was
also doing
every single one of them wants their own trailer, and it's come on,
love it.
Jeez,
that's quality. That's why he's writer comedian.
Available for parties.
King was also doing a shitload of cocaine when he did Maximum Overdrive, so that might have had a little bit to do with it as well. But anyway, so none of these guys who they wanted to do it were available or were game. So instead of trying to find other directors or whatever, I guess they're just like, what the hell? George is in, Dario's in. Let's just make it a weird twofer anthology with just two halves. So that's what they did. So they whittled it down to just 2 stories. So they whittled it down to just 2 stories, one directed by Romero, the other by Argento himself. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys my opinion. And I think that the scaling down of the project into 2 stories creates most of the issues that I have with the movie stem from that. Both segments, I think, I think they overstay their welcome. I think either one of these segments, especially Romero's, which we'll get into in a minute, would work. I think Romero's segment would work very well if it were one of 5, like in a Creep Show. If it were a 20-minute long segment instead of an almost hour-long segment.
Well, no, it's just I was interested because, one of the thoughts I had watching this is I was like, oh, this is Creep Show, except they're taking too long with both of these stories.
I don't want to get into it too much before we start talking about the actual store wraparound segment, which is kind of a given in a lot of,
which is interesting because they start it like they're going to. Like,
they show the Edgar Allan Poe house.
Yeah, they
like,
seem like there's going to be like an overarching narrative here.
Why not hire someone to play Edgar Allan Poe as like the narrator? Hell, when Savini shows up,
I was about to say, but
on,
not Tom Savini dressed as Edgar Allan Poe.
I would love that. I think Tom Savini should have been the narrator. I think Tom Savini should have been the crypt keeper of this movie, like as Edgar Allan Poe, like he appears.
I think people would actually, honest to God, you're joking, but it would be.
No, I'm not joking.
It would probably actually work.
I am 100%.
I'd be on
real.
board. I'd be on board for that.
Yeah, absolutely. He's charismatic. He's got the mustache already. So like he's, I think he'd be perfect actually. Like Tom Savini as and he's actually later on in his career, Savini has done the horror host thing. He did a thing for some network, Epics or something. I think a thing for some network, Epics or something. I think the Epics network maybe, where he played a sort of vampire type character as a like horror host. Like he had like a top hat and he had prosthetics on, fangs, like all stuff that he made up himself. But he was like the host. This was 4 or 5 years ago, fairly recently.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of fun.
Yeah.
The movie suffers from not having a wraparound segment, I think, because there's nothing that really ties the stories together, right? Other than the fact that they both happen to be adapted from Edgar Allan Poe. But other than that, there's nothing. It's just like two short movies just smashed up against each other for no apparent reason, really, because they're very different stylistically. Very different stylistically. So it makes it hard to even consider this a single film at all. Like, and the fact that Gary mentioned that this has a show makes a little more sense because a TV show would be about an hour long, right? So the Romero segment could be an episode of a TV show.
Well, Jesus, I mean, he's doing the same thing that I had a problem with in Monkey Shines. I mean, I guess this is as good a place as any to bring it up his segment is completely like soap opera-ish. Like
soap opera.
Very,
it looks like TV movie or soap opera or something. Like, I don't know what the deal is with George here at this point. And I mean, obviously I love the guy, but I mean, it's like the way these things are shot, the way they feel, over dramatic TV movie style.
Yeah. Which it's not, could work if done right. I'm not saying like melodrama can definitely work in the right situation, in the right story. And I don't think, this story is kind of perfect for that, but there's still something about it that doesn't quite work. So before we get to adapted, happen to be two of the same ones that Corman adapted in Tales of Terror, which was Romero's section, The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar, and Argento doing The Black Cat. Now, both of these sections were filmed in Pittsburgh, just like every other Romero movie. Like Argento actually came to the States. This is his first American movie. He made another one about a year later called Trauma. That's decent. It's okay. I don't love anything Argento does after about 1987 with Opera. I think Opera was his last great movie, but Trauma is worth checking out. It's got a fun Piper Laurie performance in it and some fun Tom Savini effects, actually. Tom Savini did the effects for Trauma.
Clearly you haven't seen Argento's Dracula, but...
I have. Dracula 3D? Yes, I have.
I own it on DVD.
It is bad. It is almost unwatchable. 3D? Yes, I have.
I own it on DVD.
It is bad. It is almost unwatchable.
I got so anyway, it was sitting in a horror box or something. I got it one day.
Have you seen his Phantom of the Opera?
I have not.
Out dude. It's bad. It's bad. Anyway, this is not a Dario Argento episode. I mean, it kind of is, but
we'll get to him.
We are definitely going to get to him at some point in the future. But let's talk about, I guess, each segment. We've already talked a little bit about Romero's segment, The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar. And it begins, it's the first one in the film, and it's fairly straightforward as an adaptation of the Poe story. If you've ever read that story, it's the story in the film is pretty close, other than being adapted to a more modern setting. And Gary, you mentioned that Romero had initially wanted to adapt The Mask of the Red Death. And I found a little bit of information about that as well. Some of his like signature social commentary into the segment. He kind of wanted to tackle wealth discrepancies of the 1980s and the AIDS epidemic. But Argento found this approach to be too modern, apparently. And he wanted to focus on the more kind of timeless themes of Poe's work. So that is the story that I found as to why he did not end up doing that particular Poe adaptation.
I mean, the thing I read didn't say like why it ended up not going to Romero, so that could still play into it. I mean, I feel like the wealth discrepancy thing you could probably see playing into this a little bit. Like,
you see a little bit of it here. There's a little bit of that Romero social commentary.
Adrian Barbeau playing into this position of like, I did all of this stuff so that I could bring myself up, and like she's very.
I let him use me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like she's very. It's not that she's been used knowledge of what she's doing.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm doing what I got to do.
Yeah.
To gain my stature, and so it's kind of interesting. There's also other Romero stuff here. I mean, Bingo O'Malley is in this one, and he was in Creep. He was
Geordie's dad.
Geordie's dad.
He's Geordie's dad.
The sheriff.
Which, by the way,
in
Bingo
Knight Riders.
O'Malley is an amazing name.
Yeah.
It's the best name.
He was the sheriff in Knight Riders. He
who Bingo was?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. He was Sheriff Riley, I think was his name.
Okay. And then of course Adrian Barbeau and Tom Atkins, who appears.
Yeah, fucking Tom Atkins just shows up out of nowhere.
Yeah,
that bastard.
Yeah, he just shows up out of nowhere like a fucking gumshoe out of a film noir.
Yeah,
wearing his fedora and chomping on a cigar, like does not fit the tone of the piece
doesn't.
at all. A film noir.
Yeah.
Wearing his fedora and chomping on a cigar, like does not fit the tone of the piece at all. But I love him, and I honestly wish he'd been in it more. I wish he'd been like the doctor or something that she was having an affair with.
Tom Atkins has like charisma for days. Like we talk about
and
people
Raimi
that are
Zada,
like black holes of charisma. Tom Atkins is just like he just like sweats it out of his
Raimi
pores.
Zada, who plays the doctor, is a black hole of charisma. He is.
There you go. So there's a guy who like.
So they
like if
put,
Raimi Zada's character had been played by Tom Atkins,
oh man, this would be this would be amazing. Honestly,
I'd have been sold immediately.
It would be elevated just by the addition of more Tom Atkins in it.
Yeah. And this is probably not the place to go into like Adrian Barbeau's career, but I mean, she does have that that connection to Carpenter. Like she was married to him. Obviously,
yes.
She showed up in movies. Is that she started off as a stage actress also in that general area, and like she came out with people like B. Arthur and Bette Midler. She was on like Fiddler on the Roof and Grease. Like
she was in Maude with B. Arthur, I think.
But yeah. Eventually, B. Arthur led to Maude, and she
was also Rizzo.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. In Grease, she was. She was
I didn't hear
Rizzo.
you say that. I'm sorry.
And then she became a regular in like Carpenter stuff before this movie. Like I mean, she was in
Fog,
Somebody's Watching Me, The Fog, Escape from New York.
Yeah.
She's in Creep Show and The Crate. So
I've been trying to figure out.
But
you've been trying to figure out where you knew her from.
And I didn't want to cheat. I didn't want to like pull up IMDb, and I was just like, God,
what was it?
What
Escape
else?
from New York?
What else? I know I've seen her, but
Have you seen The Fog?
She's pretty big deal at this point. She's
also in Swamp Thing.
She is in Swamp Thing.
She is in Swamp
like the original Swamp Thing, the Wes Craven one.
She's possibly besides like Keitel. She's possibly besides like Keitel the established person.
Right. Yeah.
She is the established person in her segment, I would say.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, Tom Atkins is obviously we know who he is because he's a big cult figure, but she's probably, I guess she's kind of a cult figure too, but her career was well established on stage before she ever made the jump to feature
and
films.
you think like something like Maude probably doesn't matter much to people these days,
but at the time
it was
huge. Yeah.
Well, I mean, because wasn't there still like the prevailing thought of like cinema's up here, TV's down here, so for someone to make that jump was kind of a big deal.
Yeah. And here's a role of hers later on, not long after this movie, actually, Todd, that you'll appreciate, is that she was Catwoman on the Batman animated series.
Oh yeah. Oh God, yes.
She's the voice. She's got an
a
amazing
good one. God, I love that show.
But
They
as
got-
it
they got
turns
so
out,
many
the
good
best
actors for
part
that show.
of this whole entire story is Tom Savini's special effects.
Oh,
So-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a lot of the, like Gary said, a lot of it feels like soap opera-y, or I felt like it looked like a Lifetime movie. You know,
Very.
like,
Well, I
very
say
much.
soap opera for the fact that, like, we're going to hypnotize your husband. And
yeah, it's a
steal
very
his
soap
millions.
opera. It's very much a soap opera plot. But I mean, that plot comes from Poe.
But yeah,
basically.
I mean,
The
and my
hypnotizing.
wife pointed it out, and I was like, but this is the Edgar Allan Poe story.
I know. I think that the cinematography. So Peter Reniers was the cinematographer on this, and I think it looks like really flat. You know, and I looked. So I didn't know that guy, so I looked him up on IMDb, and most of his career after Two Evil Eyes is in television. So like, there's a reason that it has that look, and I do think that Adrian Barbeau's really good at vision. So like, there's a reason that it has that look. And I do think that Adrian Barbeau's really good in it. I think that the what's his name, Rami Zada, I think he's pretty flat, pretty boring. But Bingo O'Malley gets to have a little bit of fun too later on, like when he becomes a zombie, when he becomes I guess technically he's a zombie. Although, yeah, like Gary pointed out, the real star even of that is the pretty incredible work by Tom Savini there.
I was going to say, I mean, the thing is he looks amazing.
Yeah.
He does drop the they're coming to get you. What's her name?
Yep.
It's
pretty good.
They do play on that a little bit, but
I
yeah,
mean, that
he looks
the thing
incredible.
is, once it gets to the zombie stuff, that's when the segment really starts to come to life. No pun intended. Because segment really starts to come to life. No pun intended. Because that's what Romero does best. I mean, he's the king of the zombies, you know. So that's when the segment like wakes up. It just takes too goddamn long to get there.
Yeah,
you know, like I mean, there's literally like a point that I can think of. Sorry to cut you off. There's a point that I can think of that it gets there. Like she's gone to the bank like twice already, and the guy is obviously suspicious of her. You only need one of those, but sure, maybe it takes 2 times. The guy's really suspicious, and then she's talking to Remy's character. You know, he's like, I gotta go to bed. I gotta get sleep. I got this hypnosis thing, so you should really check it out. Like, it makes it so you can't possibly wake me up. And immediately, me as a viewer, and this is the first time I've ever seen this movie, I'm like, oh, well, she'll just like fucking use that against him or something, probably.
Yeah, see, I was waiting for that too.
Right.
And then she does it. And then she comes back out and she's like unbuttoning her top and she's like, oh, he's asleep. And I was like, oh, she's clearly like fucking with him. Like she's tried. No, she's just dumb. And she still hasn't thought of it yet. We've all thought of it already.
What was his plan? How did he expect to wake up if only the person hypnotizing you can wake you up and you're asleep? Was there like
I'm no survivalist, but I think that that's a poor thing to have. Like only I guess the TikTok, like the metronome turns off
eventually
or
stops or something.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems like a terrible thing to have. I mean, although there are days that I wish I had that where I could fall asleep, but it's also like you don't want to rely on, like, you cannot possibly wait.
Especially when you're doing it after you've seen what happens to the other guy who is now stuck in some sort of purgatory limbo.
Yeah.
After dying while under hypnosis.
With the Edgar Allan Poe story that this is based on, I was surprised when he also discovers the body making noises as well, because I thought it was just going to be like her slowly going crazy kind of.
It's that whole like frustrating thing from horror movies where one person hears it, no one else does, and nobody listens to them. But it wasn't. It was immediately,
I was like, oh, he hears it too. So clearly she's not crazy. This guy's just dead. Although I was more impressed initially, these others are coming and they're taking over my body and blah, blah, blah. But then by the time you get to the end of the movie, you're like, well, the others, they figured out that far, but they're still kind of fucking stupid.
Yeah,
because you've just been holed up in this apartment for like 6 weeks, and finally somebody found you.
There was like
just
a lot
all
of
we could do is slowly lumber towards the cops and get shot again.
Right. There was a lot of like setup, and then no follow through, no punch, no delivery.
Well,
towards the cops and get shot again.
Right. There was a lot of like setup, and then no follow through, no punch, no delivery.
Well, I do think that, if we're going to talk about positive things, and we'll get back to some of the stuff that Savini did on this, because he's doing some pretty amazing effects here. You've got, I guess the first thing you see is Bingo O'Malley frozen. Like they had to make a life cast of him. They made a couple different life casts, actually. They made one of him lying on his back, which is what they use in the freezer. And they put they had to make him look frozen and kind of freezer burnt. So Savini began to research how to do that. And the one thing that him and his crew investigated was what they used in commercials to make food look cold, like the frost and stuff that you see on it. And he found out what that stuff was. And there's an interview that I watched with him where he says the name of the product. I don't remember what it is, but he used that stuff, and he used like little crystals. So you can actually see like when the light hits him a certain way, even once he's reanimated.
Granted, as opposed to CGI, is that this body is in the freezer, and there are points where Raimi's character like reaches down, and it's like when he first hears it, he's like touching his eye. Yeah, and like trying to like play with his eye, and like actually, I don't know. Like there was something about that even this time where I was like, he's physically like interacting with this amazing special effects.
Yeah.
Like it's something special about that.
Well,
like,
and not only did they have to make it like a lifelike body in there, but they had to rig it to where she shoots him in the head.
Yeah.
And it's not just a typical squib effect because he's frozen. So it's not like blood's going to come pouring out. So they rigged, a little explosive on the forehead, but he also, you've got the one in the back where the frozen brain stuff kind of hits. But they also
that was awesome.
They also rigged a little like charge under the head so that like when the shot hits him, the head doesn't just like, the stuff doesn't just come out of the back, but the head kind of jumps up a little bit from the force of the bullet. It's a very simple effect on film, but very, very effective, I think. And sort of like just shows how damn good, so effortlessly good it seems that Savini is.
It just makes you wonder like how we're still dealing with this in 2020. Well, I mean, now in 2020, you can't even see each other in person. So I imagine you have to use CGI, but you get what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess it's, we won't get into the CGI versus practical debate. I'm sure we'll mention that quite a lot on the show, but it's cheaper, I think, to do CGI. And there aren't as many guys like Savini out there now, even though he's, training more because he's got his school, but there just aren't those specialists. But you've got shows like The Walking Dead, like what Greg Nicotero's doing, which like he's doing pretty incredible makeup effects.
Yeah.
But he uses CGI too, like specialists. But you've got shows like The Walking Dead, like what Greg Nicotero's doing, which like he's doing pretty incredible makeup effects.
Yeah.
But he uses CGI too, like and I think that's kind of the best modern way to do it, which is to create those practical effects and then supplement parts of them with CGI if it's something that physically cannot be done. They didn't have that option on this movie. They didn't have that option. Savini had to figure out how to do everything.
Yeah, well, I feel like we've had that discussion before where it's like CGI is good with like enhancing a practical effect.
Right. I was just about to say CGI works best as the icing to the cake, the dressing.
Well, I always go back to Jurassic Park on that because you've got those animatronic dinosaurs. There's a reason that T-Rex still looks real 25 plus years later, 27 years later now, because it's a mix. Sometimes they'll show the animatronics. Sometimes it should, by all intents and purposes, be very dated by now, and they're honestly not.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy when you think about it. Oh, wow, yeah, that's pretty good. Well, I mean, and back to this movie, there's nothing about Mr. Valdemar that they don't. He looks good. Like he looks good.
It's a great effect.
To this day from 1990. Like he looks fantastic. Like I mean, it's a cool effect.
It is. And the other thing, so I mentioned that they had to do two different life casts for Bingo O'Malley. One was him on his back so that they could create the fake body to be shot. The other one is they had to get him to lay on his like face, like on his stomach with his face on the floor so that they could, and they did a live cast of him laying on the floor. There are pictures of this. If you pick up Savini's Grand Illusions books, which are his books where they're not really like a biography, but he breaks down a bunch of his most iconic effects. In Grand Illusions 2, he talks about Two Evil Eyes, and he talks about that scene. So there's a picture of Bingo O'Malley laying on the ground and them covering him covered in plaster, basically. So they created this live cast, and what they created that one for is for the scene where you see him on the floor, like when the cops come in and he sort of deflates and water comes out of him. And that is a practical effect where they created a live cast and then created an effect where it would sort of shrivel up on camera.
Wow. Nice.
It's pretty incredible.
That's awesome.
And then of course you've got the impalement and zombification of Rami Zada's character. I love the impalement. I think it's a fun effect.
Yeah.
Where that like obelisk thing falls right down on his chest. The way they did that is they created a fake body, just like we've actually talked about this effect, a similar effect on multiple episodes where the actor's body is below a table. They created a fake body and just his head is actually exposed. So this fake body, they had to make a hole in it that was filled with blood. And they kept trying to figure out how to drop this obelisk in the exact same spot, because they had to drop it in the same spot every time so they could do multiple takes and then rebuild it and, have the blood pop out. And they couldn't get it accurate enough. So Savini rigged a high-powered vacuum on like a pole, right? And he had the obelisk being held by the vacuum so they could accurately like kind of aim it.
Yeah.
And then they would just turn the vacuum off when they wanted it to fall, and it would fall in the exact same spot. So they did like 5 takes or something like that to get it to go exactly where they wanted it to go, which solved that problem, but it led to another problem when they did that. So the fake body was filled with blood. The idea was the thing hits the chest, blood splats out everywhere, his chest. When the blood spurted out, the skin flaps flapped out instead of going inward. So it kind of looked goofy. There is footage of this on the Blue Underground release of this movie. And you can see like these goofy little skin flaps pop out. And so they're like, well, George is like, well, we can't, this is not going to work. I mean, the skin, it would go in, it's not going to pop out. This doesn't look right. So they had to figure out what to do. And it was actually an effect that had worked for them on Creepshow that they kind of returned to. So on Creepshow, we discussed this effect where Savini, on the suggestion of George Romero, because it was another effect that they couldn't quite figure out how to do, where E.G. Marshall's character, where the roaches are coming out of it, and they used toilet paper and painted it to look like skin, right? That was George Romero's idea, because they had to figure out a way to get the roaches to break through the skin. So they did that on this too. So Romero actually used to break through the skin. So they did that on this too. So Romero actually suggested, hey, why don't we just cover the hole in toilet paper? That way you don't have to worry about this foam rubber skin popping out. And every time they did it, they would just paint it, add some like hair to it, and create his chest again. But it was just thin toilet paper that would just immediately break through when that thing dropped on it.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
It is. And that's the thing with Savini is that, and granted, this was a Romero suggestion, but Savini is so good at thinking on his toes. And there's a reason that his books on special effects are called Grand Illusion, because he considers himself a magician, that what he's doing are illusions. And a lot of times what he's doing is just that. Like there are multiple examples of him figuring out how to do something in a way that when he explains it, you're like, well, that's so simple.
I stumbled upon this, but there's a YouTube video called like Two Evil Eyes behind the scenes. I pulled it up here so I can remember. Two Evil Eyes, 1990, behind the scenes of the George Romero and Dario Argento film. There's a 1 and a 2 part of this, and they're like 15 minutes each. And it is literally like 100%. The video is uploaded by Goremeister 100, but I don't know who filmed this. It's like with a handheld video camera, and they're just like hanging out. Yeah, they're hanging out on the set, filming these guys doing this. And that scene you're talking about is in there.
Yeah, that's probably where the footage I saw came from. Because I saw it on this special feature on the Blue Underground release called Savini's Effects. It's just got Savini talking through some of them, and they shows them what looks like very like amateur home video footage. So I bet that's where the source was.
That may be. Yeah, they're like, it's literally the dude walking around backstage like
video footage. So I bet that's where the source was.
That may be. Yeah, they're like, it's literally the dude walking around backstage like shooting the shit with Savini, like just filming all the props that are back there and stuff. And but yeah, they go on set for like, you hear the vacuum come on for like that scene, and like you're like seeing it actually happen. His head poked through the thing, and like the obelisk hits, and they're like blood spurts, and it gets in his mouth, and they're like, "Hey, are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. It's fine." But so, it's kind of interesting. So yeah,
it's really fun to watch how that stuff is created, honestly. So this segment is, I think, in my opinion, one of Romero's lesser works. I don't think anyone is going to really argue that. It's kind of stodgy, kind of melodramatic, and I think it does really suffer from being as long as it is. I think EC Comics vibe to it, right? Even the ending, like it reminds me of the ending of like Something to Tide You Over from Creepshow. Like it's this sort of melodramatic story, love story kind of thing, love triangle. And then it ends in zombies coming back, which is fun and works in Creepshow because it's only like 20 minutes long.
It's the only part that makes me believe that the TV show idea is accurate. That that Romero, had he known I'm doing a feature with Argento,
right?
Like he would have, like, I feel like there's like another step he would have taken, or another something he would have done.
Well, here's the other thing is that I don't think a lot of the failure of this segment is Romero's fault, because what happened, so, Argento comes to Pittsburgh to film this, but then after they're done, he takes the movie back to Europe, and all the post-production is done in Europe, and Romero has practically nothing to do with the post-production, including the editing, including the music, which I think is really goofy. And I mean, not goofy, but it's not great. I don't think it's great. I don't think the music, I think it's kind of cheesy. So Romero had very little say in what was happening to the movie once the shoot was done. It was all Argento. So you can't fully lay it at Romero's feet, because he may have intended to cut 15 minutes out of it.
I'm not laying anything at the feet of the writer director of Knight Riders right now that I don't 100% enjoy. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No. I'm it really does. This one feels like a episode of Masters of Horror, or like a TV show in general. Like it's melodrama. You used that word earlier. That's probably how I felt about most of it. And it does. It lasts too long. Like it could have shaved 10 to 20 minutes off this thing and got the point across. The effects by Savini are what save it. It's 100% what makes it worth seeing is just the gore effects that happen in this segment.
Well, let's move on to the next segment then, because this one just ends. that's how that happens. It just cuts, and then all of a sudden the title to the next one pops up on screen. You're like, oh, I guess we're moving on.
Now it's time to start another one.
So that's what we're going to do. We're moving on to The Black Cat, directed by Dario Argento. So it's pretty immediately apparent when Romero's segments start that the two halves of this film are going to be wildly different, because we open this segment in the middle of a grisly crime scene, which has Argento's signature visual style. You get that shot, and you get the grisly gore that you expect from Argento immediately in this first scene, which has no real bearing on the rest of the story other than to introduce Harvey Keitel's character. But so Argento's half of the film is an adaptation of The Black Cat, but it also peppers in references from several other Poe stories, starting with The Pit and the Pendulum, which is kind of what that is referencing there at the beginning of the segment. Other references include character names, like Harvey Keitel's character's name is Rod Usher, Follow the House of Usher. references to other stories. Like you've got a corpse with teeth pried out, which is in Berenice, the Poe story, or a corpse hidden behind a wall, like in the Telltale Heart, which is kind of fun. It almost feels like Argento just wanted to throw in every Poe reference that he could, since he only got to do 2 stories instead of 5. That's kind of what it feels like to me.
No, I was 100% going to say is like initially right.
Stories instead of 5. That's kind of what it feels like to me.
No, I was 100% going to say is like initially right from the beginning. Besides the fact that you get a naked lady cut in half, you're like, all right, well, this is already different. And then you're like, oh, it's a pendulum. Oh, and it's like,
I get it.
Clearly, like, oh, you know this one. Yeah. We're talking Poe tonight, baby. You know the pendulum.
And that
where are all my Poe fans? Where Poe fans?
Where my Poe's at?
Yeah, where am I? Damn it. Where are all my Poe's at?
God, why, Justin?
That's
so
solid.
Off the cuff. That's so good.
So the effects in this, of course, are once again done by Savini, getting to work for Argento. And the first effect that you see is that woman cut in half by the pendulum. And so what they did for this is they put out an ad for someone to come do it. They hired this woman who's a stripper, studio for a full body cast, completely nude. So initially they were actually going to do it with her panties still on, or her bikini bottom or whatever. And they decided to do that. Argento was going to want to do it
with her caveman bikini.
Huh?
With her caveman bikini.
Yeah. So,
you know what I'm saying?
Argento, I guess, told Savini that no, he wanted to do it fully nude. So they kind of had to talk this lady into doing that. They were like, because they're covering her in plaster. And if they're going to do it fully nude, well, they have to cover everything in plaster. And they kind of, Savini was like, it'll be brief. It'll, we'll get it done. It'll be fine. And so she agreed to it, and they did it. And they created several live casts of it so that they could create the version of her that's sliced in half. And they did it. So they created that out of like foam latex, and the entrails were created. And so what they ended up doing is they ended her fully nude. She's going to have her bottoms on. So the day of the shoot comes, they've got the 2 halves on the table, and Argento changes his mind again, says, oh no, she is going to be fully nude. Well, because he had told them that she wasn't going to be, they didn't create any pubic hair on this model, on this or this foam latex model. So Savini is on set. Like if you walked into set that day, you see Savini hand threading pube hairs on this thing on set the day of, which is again just Savini, working, having to be on his toes all the time.
The glamour of Hollywood.
He's threading pube hair on this fake woman.
I know, it's so weird. This is the most I've ever related to Tom Savini.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't either. 100%.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't either. 100%. I don't know, but it just felt like the right time to say that.
But Savini tells a story about how the day that when they were filming that, like Argento was kind of squeamish around the dead body. Like he went and like touched the entrails that were out on the table and was kind of grossed out by him and wouldn't touch them again, which is weird if you've ever seen an Argento movie to think of him being squeamish about anything. But he was very like kind of squeamish and didn't want to touch them. But then they turned on the pendulum, and it's slicing back and forth. And Savini says that Argento had this sort of look of kind of glee on his face, like he was in his happy place once that started, because it was like his vision was being brought to life, which is it's a fun effect. It doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the story. Like if you've ever heard of a photographer named Ouija, it's a guy who took a lot of pictures of crime scenes and stuff, and a great photographer, but he kind of reminds me of that. Although I could never figure out exactly, like, because you see him in an office at one point. It's like, does he work for a newspaper? But then he just puts out a book of him strangling a cat, which is a weird thing for anyone to publish. But so it's a very, but again, this is an Argento movie, so not everything's going to make sense. I mean, that's just That's
Well, at
just
least
par
you
for the
said
course.
it. Yeah. No, it was 100%. I'm like, who's this guy producing photos for? Like,
Yeah.
it just, I don't know,
Yeah.
because like what cop? I don't know, because the one cop is just like super into it. Like, he likes the gore. When they get to that like woman with her teeth removed, he's just like, oh, look at this. And he like seems offended, and he's just like, oh, I'm sorry. He's just like, no, open it back up. I'll take some photos. He's like, it's it's real awkward. Sorry, that's the best way I could describe it.
No, that's spot on.
Another effect that Savini created for this, and he goes into great detail in interviews about this, is that he created a giant cat puppet. So basically, they wanted to get like some close-ups of a cat being able to like hiss and things like that on command, because cats are not easy to train.
What?
So this was like an articulated puppet, basically, where its eyes were mechanical and would open, its mouth, it would hiss, and it was used kind of like a puppet, like by a puppeteer had his hand up in it, but it also had a lot of mechanical stuff like an animatronic, and it's very complex. And in this documentary on the Blue Underground DVD, Savini goes into like this long story. They're showing all this footage of this cat that they created. Then at the end of it, after he explains how it was created and all this, he just goes,
mechanical cat head. It was simply a sculpture of a cat with glass eyes, cat eyes from a taxidermist place, oversized cat eyes. I think it was for some other animal, but it worked in the cats. And lots of mechanisms to make his ears flap back, make his lips go, and his eyes squint, his forehead to come down. So the cat had all these movements in him. And in fact, it's not even in the movie, because he had some good movement, but I don't think he looked enough like a real cat, you know. I used the cat in Night of the Living Dead. I just put him in a hole with maggots all over him.
So he went to all this work and it never even made it onto screens. Argento ended up not.
I was about to say, like, now this bitch can't just buy a dead cat.
Yeah, right.
Now he's got to work extra hard. He's like, oh, I can't do a monkey. I'll do a dead cat for that. He's like, oh, hey, man, you're really good at finding dead cats on the internet. It's like, where's that skill ever going to come in?
Yeah, right.
Now he's got to work extra hard. He's like, oh, I can't do a monkey. I'll do a dead cat for that. He's like, oh, hey, man, you're really good at finding dead cats on the internet. It's like, where's that skill ever going to come in handy? If not now, then when, Savini?
So, and of course, I think the most memorable effect in not only this segment, but the entire film is the corpse and the kind of zombie kitten that's hold up in the wall at the end. The kitten, of course, was a mechanized puppet, but it's not just that one cat. Like if you watch that scene, there's like other cats coming out of the corpse and stuff. It's really creepy and really gross.
Which begs the question: did the cat put its babies in the body?
Well, here's the thing with Argento movies, Todd, because I know that you're probably
deep red.
Okay, so you've only
saw it in our live showing.
I've survived Deep Red.
Oh my God, two of you, sons of bitches. His movies are style over substance for the most part. He, and this is not just an Argento thing. This is an Italian thing from that era. Italian horror movies from the era. La Giallo movies have the same thing where it will jump to conclusions that don't really make any sense, but they're cool. Like they look cool things, but even if they don't make sense narratively, and Argento does that a lot. And I think that's what he's doing here. I think he was just like, it'd look super cool if this corpse is just filled with a bunch of zombie cats. And it does look cool. He's right. It doesn't make any sense if you think about it, but who cares? It looks cool. You know, that corpse, by the way, they used the same life cast as the stripper that was killed by the pendulum, because they knew that like they didn't have to get a live cast of this other. It's going to be so decomposed and stuff that you wouldn't be able to tell anyway. So they just used one they already had.
Yeah, why not? Save yourself a little time and money.
Yeah. So we're kind of goofing on the timelines with this a little bit, because we like to do these series. We've been doing this in chronological order, like from release, Night of the Living Dead. Everything up till now has been in chronological order. This one we're listing as a 1990 release, but The movie that we're talking about next week is actually technically earlier than Two Evil Eyes, because this movie, its original theatrical release in Italy was in 1990, but it wasn't released in the U.S. until the next year, 1991. But it got such a small, limited release that the U.S. release barely warrants a mention. Honestly, like it was that minuscule because Argento, like I think they were kind of eyeing like the video market for this one because Argento, like I think they were kind of eyeing like the video market for this one. Like they took it to Italy, they released it theatrically, but this was 1990, so the DTV market was pretty big, and I think that they thought, hey, we'll release it in a few theaters, enough to get a little bit of visibility on it, and then we'll dump it on video and make that video money. So I don't know how much money they made. There's not a lot of information out there about this one on how it did, but it was pretty. It's one of the more obscure movies we've talked about on this series, aside from effects, of course, because it barely got a release. So what did you guys think about this segment as its own, but also compared to the Romero one?
No, I saw some people trying to be like different or combative about this. I don't know that there was like some kind of competition between the two. This was 100% my favorite set. He so rightfully deserves. I'll be happy to do so because most times in life I won't. This one was the most entertaining of the two segments, I would say. I would argue that probably the best thing that came out of this entire film was the introduction of Julie Benz as Billy.
That's the best thing. Better than Savini's work on this movie, Julie Benz.
Okay, well, the thing is we already knew Savini was good. We knew Savini was good before and after this movie. It was just like, this is a thing Savini did that you're like, oh, also he did this and it was also good.
Yeah, he still did good work.
He still did good work. Julie Benz was, for what it's worth, I looked up an interview with her about this very thing, and she is from that general area. She's from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And so she had signed on to be an extra in this movie. And
then they're like, you're really pretty. You need to be.
I think that's what happened. Yeah, because like literally the way she describes it is that she was there to be an extra, and Argento came out and was like, hello, come with me, and like pulls her out of the crowd and is like,
nothing ever bad has happened when a producer or director says that to a young actress.
Have you, I mean,
can you literally, this is her quote. She said, but it's so funny because I didn't really know who he was at the time. I know him,
and he
now,
looks like
obviously.
a fucking ghoul. Like, like Argento looks like one of Savini's effects.
But I went in to be an extra on the movie, and he saw me sitting out waiting to meet. This is from the AV Club, by the way, just so I give proper credit. AV Club, by the way, just so I give proper credit. But I went in to be an extra on the movie, and he saw me sitting out waiting to meet the casting director, and he pulled my mother and I into a separate conference room. He speaks very broken English. He's Italian, so I'm going to do a very bad Italian impersonation. But he asked me my name, and I told him, and he goes, walk across the room. I did it like Dracula. I don't know.
That seems to be your go-to.
Hey, I walk across the room.
Walk across the room. So I walked across the room, and he says, okay, now come back. And I walked back. He looked at me, and he said, do you want to be in my movie? And I was like, yeah, I do. He's like, no. Do you want to be in my movie? And I was like, yes, I want to be in your movie. And he goes, okay, you play Betty. And I was like, oh, I'm playing an extra named Betty. When we got home, they'd called. My mom negotiated my deal. She didn't do a very good job. It's fine. But that's how I got my SAG card. I really didn't know who Dario was. I didn't know who Harvey Keitel was. It was a wonderful experience, though. Working with Dario was a lot of fun. He's a larger-than-life character with an Italian accent. He would yell at you in Italian, and I'd have no idea what he was saying. I'd just go, okay. But it was a really great experience. It was shot in Pittsburgh. That's where I'm born and raised. It was really nice to be part of Pittsburgh film culture. Yeah. And so that she goes on to talk a little bit in this interview about how like she didn't realize like she had a goal of being in romantic comedies before this, but realized from this experience and then later with Buffy that like genre film is where it's at. Yeah. That like that those fans are as passionate as you are about making a movie. Those fans are as passionate about viewing the movie. So that
the art. Well, Todd, I'm sorry I didn't let you give me your thoughts on this segment.
Yeah, I think along the lines of what Gary said, I think Argento's segment is better. To be honest, I looked at this thing as a whole. As a whole, this thing is saved by Adrian Barbeau, Harvey Keitel, Tom Savini. It's very weird. It starts off very awkwardly.
What do you mean? What do you mean weird?
There's some stuff in that. I'm not a big Argento fan, especially.
You've seen one Argento movie, so I think that's kind of a hard. I think that's kind of a hard thing to have a.
Have you not seen Suspiria, Todd?
You know what? I have not seen Suspiria.
Fuck. All right.
Yeah, I know.
So you're not a fan of the one Argento movie you've seen?
I'm not a fan of that one.
I don't blame you. It's terrible.
Which is a piece of gold to Justin. So
you guys are fired from the podcast.
I mostly just hate on it because it just drives Justin nuts.
Yeah. Well, this isn't a discussion about Deep Red, but
it could be.
It just didn't blow my skirt up. Neither segment really did. I mean, the effects are good, but I felt like there were a couple of things that they were having a couple of lines that Harvey Keitel was having to do that just sounded forced and didn't. I'm with you 100%.
Well, you got to remember that this is an English language film being written by two guys who don't really speak English.
There is something about Harvey Keitel's performance in this one that like just drove me crazy. That I was like, even if you were like, I don't know, like how do you like, I don't know, like how do you let yourself? You got to just. I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking like you're just happy to be there collecting the paycheck and that's fine.
I mean, he's not phoning it in. He is.
There are parts of it he's not, but there are some dialogue options that he delivers that are just like, this is clearly like you were.
Here's the thing. Harvey Keitel's not a dummy,
dude.
He's not a dummy. So he probably, I'm sure he did his due diligence. And when it came time for a particular scene with a particular line, he's like, hey, look, I'm in it. I know this character. This is where it's going. And I feel like producer, writer, director, someone came to him and said, go bigger, swing for the fences. And, he's there, he's game. They're signing the check. So he did. And that's the take that they used. And it's, he's there, he's game. They're signing the check. So he did. And that's the take that they used. And it's just not, it's just not
there
good.
Is some of it that just sounds like Harvey Keitel is literally reading off of the page.
Yeah.
It's like he's, I don't know. And obviously I'm not me trying to judge Harvey Keitel as an actor. I know that I could never fathom the skill level that this man has. And I'm no George Romero and I'm no Dario Argento. I'm just saying I'm going to side with Todd that this movie, if you've never seen it, I have never seen it my entire life until right now for this show. I did not miss anything.
Well, here's the thing. I am not going to argue that this is like a great unsung masterpiece. It's not. It's a lesser work from both of these directors. I think shorter versions of them, but in a larger anthology, I think they would have worked better. I honestly think that, ironically, that because I said that the Argento portion feels a little like it could be padded out a little bit more and could have been done as a feature length had he because it does feel like it it jumps from it jumps to some pretty insane places pretty quickly. Like the Harvey Keitel going, like he just immediately goes crazy, basically, when that cat shows up. You don't really know why. Granted, this is also Argento logic. This is Italian horror logic that you kind of have to take into effect. But I think overall, like Romero's half is the more cohesive story. Like you can sit down and tell me beat for beat what happens in that story, right?
Right. Yeah.
But Argento's, I think, is a lot more fun because it's filled cohesive story. Like you can sit down and tell me beat for beat what happens in that story, right?
Right. Yeah.
But Argento's, I think, is a lot more fun because it's filled to the brim, wall to wall, with just insane stuff happening. Even the like diversions from the main story, like the weird dream sequence flashback stuff that's going on, where you see Harvey Keitel in medieval times and he gets impaled, which is a great effect. That shit has shit all to do with the main plot. It's just Argento having fun with this Poe stuff and shooting some just wild shit because that's what Argento does, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. It's at some point, because I mean, to be honest, both of these parts, and I was thinking about this as and thinking about this movie in particular, and how I feel like this, and I know I wasn't the biggest fan of Creepshow, but I feel like this could have taken a page from Creepshow and had the wraparound scene, like you guys mentioned earlier.
Have that comic booky lighting,
Yeah,
and,
okay.
Yeah, I think Justin's on with like the wraparound segment. That's the part of it that it's really missing. Is like let's present this as an anthology series.
To
this
be
movie
honest,
in no way like tells you that. Like I don't,
with these two parts being as long as they are, I kind of wish they'd gone a little bit more like Grindhouse, and because weren't there some other folks tied into this? Like, let them shoot like a little 5-minute thing.
Well,
and stick it between the features.
A lot of them were unavailable. That's why they ended up only being the two.
Well, the other part to what Todd just said is one of the interesting parts of this that I was fascinated by, and I kept. The other part to what Todd just said is one of the interesting parts of this that I was fascinated by, and I kept trying to look this up. Is there is a guy who's credited in this movie, Peter Coper, who's credited as a screenwriter in this movie, or he's not. I'm sorry, he's uncredited in this movie, and he is like at this time he was a production designer for like many John Waters films, and he had been working with George Romero, and he had written a movie called Headless Body in a Topless Bar. That's
a great name.
I know.
That is a great title. That is a great title.
And it was described by many magazine articles as like Showgirls without the budget.
Okay.
And,
all right.
But he ended up being like a TV writer for like America's Most Wanted and with John Waters. Like
in Baltimore.
Had been part of the Dreamlanders, which was like the crew of regulars who John Waters always worked with in his films and stuff. And he had like apparently also like worked heavily in this movie, but he was uncredited for some reason. And that's the fascinating part of it for me that I was trying to dig up before we started recording, that I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, what is his deal with this movie? But otherwise, no, I feel like this is like a Tales from the Dark Side or Creepshow or whatever that just, it's fun. Like, I think if you're looking for like some Halloween, it's October, you're looking for your scary movie fix, you want to throw on something, like this is not like a bad choice. Like, it's nothing about this is offensive.
But I feel like it exists mostly as a fun. Oh, cool! Two like masters of horror worked on this thing together, Dario Argento and George Romero.
Well, yeah, at the very top of the show, you referenced Masters of Horror, and it's like it would have absolutely fit in with that series, where it's like all of those Masters of Horror episodes, for the most part, were just like, these are inoffensive productions from.
You clearly have not seen Takashi Mieke's Masters of Horror episode.
I'm saying that like maybe these are not their great works, but they're and I may not. I don't think I did see Takashi Mieke's. It never
aired because it was.
I was going to say it did not air.
Argento did one.
Yeah, he did.
Toby Hooper did one.
Stuart Gordon did some stuff.
Cigarette Burns by John Carpenter. That's a great one.
Yeah,
love Carpenter.
Toby Hooper, I think, did some stuff, and these guys obviously have skills. It's fine.
Well, this was the last official collaboration, really, between Romero as a director and Savini as an effects guy. But it's not the last film that they worked on together, because the same year that this came out, Romero served as an executive producer on a film that Tom Savini would direct. And that's the movie we're going to be talking about next week here on the show to wrap up our Romero Savini series. I'm sure Todd's ready for it to be over. But next week from 1990, we're talking about the remake of Night of the Living Dead.
I'm looking forward to this. I've never seen it before.
I actually watched this probably like early on in my life more often than I did the original. Now it has been 10 years, 15 years since I've seen this movie. But what I'm saying is I'm excited to go rewatch seeing this movie. But what I'm saying is I'm excited to go rewatch this. I'm excited to see Tom Savini finally, like, full circle. In a sense, like, Tom Savini's come around, and he
finally gets to work on Night of the Living Dead.
Well, he's finally getting back to Night of the Living Dead. He's also been a key part of the team the whole entire time, from actor to special effects to whatever you needed him on. Tom Savini was there, and now he gets to direct a film for himself. So this is an exciting point.
Yeah, it should be fun. If you guys want to stream and watch it along with us, just visit cinemashock.net. You'll find a link to stream it there on our show description for this episode. And you guys have anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No, I think this was, again, even though I didn't like it, I appreciate that I got to see it. It's great to have two Masters of Horror in one shot. And that's
now this is episode 9. And I think Todd is like 3 of these movies, 3 out of 9, batting 33% here, Todd.
Justin, I'm not going to do a spoiler alert here because we're not giving anything away, but I encourage anybody who is Todd or thinks like Todd to hang on, because I assure you we have made plans that after this Romero Savini series, which ends at Night of the Living Dead, the remake here, you're going to be very excited about what's next. But
don't get used to it, because we're going to talk about some mostly weird shit on this series. I'm just saying, Todd, you're in for a ride. You ain't seen nothing yet, sir.
That's very clear. Yeah,
just hang on, because we're gonna hit some
with
Todd wheelhouse.
Wife and former guest on the last podcast we did, Fred Sims, about me showing up on the best of series, and every film was just so. Todd, what'd you think? I didn't see it. Sorry,
that happened, but now you can't do that because We've
included you,
the effort.
Now you have to see them.
Yep, I'm making the effort. I am putting in the time. I'm doing the baby steps. I'm doing the work. I'm not a slacker,
guys. I just want to. Can I just say too that, like, one of the coolest parts about this for me, like, that as far as we are into this series, one of the best parts, if you guys haven't been paying attention, and Todd and Justin, I assume maybe you've seen this, but the George A. Romero Foundation has been super supportive of this series. People have been responding.
Yeah.
There are people that are paying attention and seeing this thing in the George A. People have been responding.
Yeah.
There are people that are paying attention and seeing this thing, and the George A. Romero Foundation has been very good about retweeting and showing what we're doing on Twitter and and other places. They're so if you guys listening to
go
this,
give them some love, people.
Yeah, whoever you are out there, if you're hearing this and you're not following the George A. Romero Foundation, you definitely should. They're a foundation that's trying to really put some effort and money back into the arts and support back into the arts and filmmaking, especially in that general Pittsburgh area that George Romero is not around to support so much anymore. He did create a foundation that is trying to support that, and these are cool people, and they're trying to do good things. So if you can just at least support them,
they're on
get the
Patreon
word out
now too.
Yeah. So just
So
at least back them up a little bit, like help spread that word is what I'm saying. At least just like get that voice out there a little bit further. Let it be part of
they are
show.
at the Garf GARF official on Twitter.
Yeah,
they've
been super cool, and it's just nice that they're into this, and a lot of people are. And I was telling Todd right before this, a dude sent me the Blu-ray of Night Riders. There are people that are finding out more, even if it's just like 3 people. The word is spreading. We're spreading the word about George Romero, and even if everything wasn't your cup of tea, already this podcast is making people realize the benefit of exploring further into these artists' careers and their
and more than just those like Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, like really deep diving into their filmographies.
Right.
Yeah. We've seen a couple of people already recognize parts of their filmography that they had never noticed before. So that's already making me feel like what we've done now going into Cinema Shock is more rich than anything we've done before.
Yeah. And if, as someone who just finished producing a comedy show where I was praying to God people would show up, and I know there's a feeling out there of like, oh, things are tight, I can't really give or anything like that. Let me just tell you, it doesn't have to be a king's ransom. As a performer, I'm grateful for every single ass and every single seat and every penny that comes in. So if you support the arts, for every single ass and every single seat and every penny that comes in. So if you support the arts and support local independent artists of any kind, the George Romero Foundation is a good place to start.
Todd.
Yes.
Where would you like people to follow you on the internet?
I am easily findable at Mr. Todd A. Davis on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and D&D Beyond. And my t-shirts are available now.
Where can you buy those?
From me directly. Just reach out to me online. We'll figure something out.
People have figured it out for the most part. That is the quickest we've ever gotten through Todd. So I will just jump in and say I am at This Is Gary Horde on everything. This is Gary Horde. I lost my breath halfway through saying it the first time.
I am at Justin_Bishop. Follow the show at Cinema_Shock on Twitter, Instagram.
Myers from Reseda, California. Johnny has the keys. Did either of you guys get a real big boner when he was strangling the cat?
Oh no.
Strangling the cat.
Oh no.